It was Mrs. Pearson. It was Mr. Weinstein. We could never call them by their first name.
Asha Dornfest here from Parent Hacks. I have a question for you about how you like children to address you as an adult. Do you expect them to call you Mr. or Mrs., or do you want them to call you by your first name? And I'm wondering if you think that that somehow affects how children treat you as an adult, if they respect you more when they call you Mrs., or if they treat you with a lot of familiarity, maybe a little bit too much.
We prefer that our sons address other adults as Mr. or Mrs. or Sir or Ma'am.
I'm Ellen Kay from On Air with Ryan Seacrest. Happy to be here on Momversation. So my son is 7, and I noticed that his friends call me by my first name, but they put the Mrs. in front of it. It's something that my husband really believes in. He grew up in the South, so he grew up calling his friends' parents by their first names, so he put the Mr. or the Mrs. in front of it. So it would be Mrs. Ellen or Mr. Roy. And so I kind of demand that.
Ellen, much like your husband, I was raised in the South, and growing up, if I did not refer to every elder as either sir or ma'am, there were dire consequences. Everyone was yes sir, yes ma'am, and sometimes we weren't even allowed to call them by their last names, like Mrs. Rushing or whatever. It was yes ma'am, excuse me ma'am, you know.
I think it's important to teach them to respect their elders, and that's the mantra that my mom had when I was growing up: respect your elders.
There was one time I was probably like 10, and I was in my bedroom, and my mom called and she said, "Heather," and I went, "What?" As 10-year-olds are wont to do. And my dad was in my bedroom within a millisecond, and he had me on the floor, and he was this close to my face, and he's like, "Do not ever answer your mother with a word."
I think that if you don't ask for it, it really does lead to a lack of respect, and they probably aren't going to treat you like you are someone's parent.
You know, it's funny. I don't feel comfortable with kids calling me Mrs. at all. In fact, I insist that they call me by my first name. And yet, I complain when I don't think that kids respect my authority as an adult.
I actually prefer being called Mrs. and I've only really had this happen like once or twice, but I don't really like it when my kids' friends just come up and say, "Hey, Dana," because it's just no, we're not pals. I am my son's mother, and I just think it is a sign of respect to just address me as Mrs. Lash.
My mom insisted on being called Mrs. when I was growing up. In fact, she was offended when one of my friends called her by her first name, and this was when I was in college. So my mom's not a particularly conservative person, but she really did feel traditional about that.
When I was growing up, we had to call my parents' friends by their last names only. It was Mrs. Pearson. It was Mr. Weinstein. We could never call them by their first name. I don't even know what their first names are. And even still to this day, if I see them, I wouldn't know their first names or what to call them.
I think it's really lacking in this generation. I mean, really. There's kids that I see that just don't, teenagers that I see now that just don't demonstrate a lot of respect.
Yeah, it's a little relaxed, but I think the point is to teach your children respect for elders no matter what. And whether or not they call them by their first name isn't as important as how they treat your friends.
I see a lot of casual kickback addressing of first names. There's my friend Lisa, there's my friend Kim, and they get called that by some of the kids who come around their house. We always stop it.
Right now, with the way things are, I think there's just this huge, I don't know, there's a lack of manners, I think. And it's not just from kids, I think it's from a lot of adults too. And I don't know if it's because of the internet age or what it is, but I really, really like the distinction of kids addressing adults as sir or ma'am.
Join the Momversation at momversation.com.